In this lesson, we're going to talk about how to prove that triangles are congruent. The idea of congruent says that two geometric figures with exactly the same size and shape are congruent. So for example, if we had triangle ABC and triangle DEF, if we know that they're exactly the same size and exactly the same shape, then they are congruent. But how much do we need to know about a triangle in order to prove that they are congruent? If we know that all 6 parts of a triangle are congruent, then we know that the triangles are congruent. So for example, if we know that all 3 sides, if we know that AB is congruent to DE, BC is congruent to EF, and CA is congruent to FD, and then we also know the angles. If we know that angle A is congruent to angle D, B is congruent to angle E, and C is congruent to angle F. If we know all of those things, then we also know that those 2 triangles are congruent. But do we need to know all 6 of those things? Do we need to know that all 3 sides are congruent and all 3 angles are congruent in order to prove that those are congruent? No, we do not. We have 4 ways of proving that a triangle is congruent just by knowing 3 things about them. Side, 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 angle, angle, and angle, angle, side are the 4 things we're going to go over. The first one is side, side, side. What this says that if you are given that 3 triangles, or that 2 triangles have all 3 sides that are congruent, then we know that those triangles are congruent. So if we know that AB is congruent to DE, BC is congruent to EF, and AC is congruent to DF, then we know that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. So basically what that's saying is that if we know that these 2 triangles are congruent, not only do we know that these sides are congruent, but we also know that these angles are congruent. Just by the fact that we were given those sides. Now here we're going to talk about included angles. An included angle is an angle that's included in between the sides. So for here, if we're given side IG and side GH, then the included angle would be angle G. If we're given side IG and side IH, then the included angle would be angle I. And then if we're given side IH and side GH, then our included angle would be angle H. So here we're going to name the included angles. Here we have side YE and side ES. So the included angle is going to be angle E. In side ES and side YS, the included angle is going to be angle S. Inside YS and side YE, the included angle is going to be angle Y. Side angle side is another one of our postulates that we know how to prove that triangles are congruent. So we've talked about side, side, side that can prove that a triangle is congruent. We can also prove it if we know that a side, an angle, and a side are congruent. So for example, on this one, we're given that AB is congruent to DE, angle A is congruent to angle D, and angle AC is congruent to angle DF. So we're given a side, an angle, and a side. And the included angle on this, right, was angle A and angle D, because they're both in between the 2 sides. So we know that triangle ABC is congruent to angle DEF. So since we know that, we also know that these sides are congruent and that these angles are congruent as well. The included side then would be the same thing as an included angle, except now we're talking about a side that's in between 2 angles. So if we're given angle I and angle G, our included side is going to be GI. If we're given angle I and angle H, our included side is going to be HI. If we're given angle G and angle H, our included side is going to be GH. So we've had side, 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 angle, side, And now in this one, we're going to have angle, side, angle. So in this one, we're given two angles and a side that are congruent. And the side has to be in between the two angles. So here we're given that angle A is congruent to angle D, side AB is congruent to side DE, and angle B is congruent to angle E. So here we're given an angle, a side, and an angle. So we know that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. And if you look here, AB and DE are the included side, right? They're right there in between the two angles. So here we're going to name the included side. If we're given angle Y and angle E, our included side is going to be YE. If we're given angle E and angle S, our included side is going to be ES. If we're given angle S and angle Y, our included side is going to be YS. Okay, this is our last postulate that we're going to go over. We've had side, 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 angle, side, angle, side, angle. Now we're going to have angle, angle, side. So this one is given two angles and then a side. So here the side is not in between the two angles, right? They're in consecutive order. First an angle, then another angle, and then a side on the outside. So here we're given first angle A is congruent to angle D, then angle B is congruent to angle E, and then BC is congruent to EF. So here we're given an angle, and a side, so we know that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. So here is your warning, okay? There is no side-side angle postulate, okay? There is no such thing as side-side angle, okay? We cannot prove that triangles are congruent if we're given two sides and an angle. We also cannot prove that two triangles are congruent by angle, angle, angle. So if we're given that all three angles are congruent, that does not mean that the triangles are congruent. So here they are: side, 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 angle, side, angle, side, angle, side, and angle, angle, side. Okay? There is no SSA and there is no AAA. Okay, that's just something you got to memorize. So here we're going to name the postulates. Okay, so let's look at what we're given. On here, we're given a side that's congruent, then we're given an angle that's congruent, and then we're given another side that's congruent. So this would be side, angle, side. Here, we're given an angle that's congruent to this angle. Then we're given a side that's congruent to that side, and then we're given this angle that's congruent to this angle. So this postulate would be angle, side, angle. For this one, okay, we're given an angle, a side, and a side. Okay, this angle is congruent, this side is congruent, and this side is congruent. And what did we say earlier, right? There is no SSA. So we cannot prove that these two triangles are congruent. On this one, we're given that this side is congruent to this side is congruent to this side, and this side is congruent to this side. So we can prove that this is congruent by side, side, side. On this one, we're given this angle is congruent, this angle is congruent, and this angle is congruent. So we're given angle, 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 which we cannot prove that these triangles are congruent because we cannot prove angle, angle, angle. For this one, we're given an angle, a side, and an angle. And here we're given an angle, a side, and an angle that are congruent. So we have angle, side, angle. That is one that we can use, so we can prove that these two triangles are congruent. On this one, we're given a side that's congruent, an angle that's congruent, and another side that's congruent. So here we have side, angle, side, which is a way to prove congruency. So we do know that those are congruent. Here we're given an angle that's congruent, a side that's congruent, and a side that's congruent, okay? So here we have SSA. Now, again, we cannot prove the triangles are congruent according to SSA, so we can't prove anything about those two. On this one, we're given a side that's congruent, and then we're given an angle that's congruent, but we're not given anything else. But what do we know about this? Okay, what do we see here? We see that this triangle shares this line right here. Okay, since it shares this line, obviously this line is going to equal itself, right? So we have a side then that's congruent, and we have an angle that's congruent, and then according to the reflexive property, we know that this side is congruent to itself. So we can prove that these two triangles are congruent according to side, angle, side. For this one, okay, we're given that these two sides are congruent and these two sides are congruent, but that's all that we're given. Okay, but if we look here, we know that this angle is congruent to this angle because of vertical angles, right? We learned about vertical angles earlier. Vertical angles are angles that are across from each other, and they're always congruent. So we can prove side, angle, side for this one, okay? On this one, okay, we have a side that's congruent, another side that's congruent, okay? And then, according to vertical angles, again, we can say side, angle, side. On this one, okay, we're given a side that's congruent, and we're given an angle that's congruent, okay? And according to the reflexive property, again, we can say that these sides are congruent because this line is congruent to itself. But this one is side, side, angle, which we cannot prove. So this is not one that we can prove. On this one, okay, we have this side that's congruent, we have this side that's congruent, and then according to the reflexive property, we know that this side is congruent. So this one would be side, side, side. On this one, we're given that this angle is congruent to this angle. We're given that this side is congruent to this side, okay? And then we're not really given any other information, right? These two triangles share this angle, but that's on the outside, right? That's an exterior angle, so we don't really know anything else. So really all we have is an angle and a side here, so we can't prove anything on that one. On this one, we're given three angles. This one's congruent to this one, this one's congruent to this one, this one's congruent to this one. So we're given angle, angle, angle. Again, we cannot prove that triangles are congruent with angle, angle, angle. On this last one right here, okay, we're given an angle. These two angles are congruent. This side is congruent. And then according to vertical angles, these two angles are congruent. So we're given an angle, a side, and an angle. So we can prove that these two triangles are congruent. On this one, we're given a side that's congruent. We're given an angle that's congruent. Okay, and then we're not given any other information, but again, they're sharing this side right here. So we know that this side is congruent to itself. So here we're given side, side, angle, which we cannot prove. So this one we cannot prove. And that is the end of proving triangles are congruent.